going on, internet? So I am back today to talk about another film that I watched in my 2021 catch-up, where I'm trying to get everything watched before I make my best of 2021 list. The film I'm going to talk about today is one that I'm really surprised that I didn't see in the theater, because it's made by a filmmaker who I really appreciate a lot, and was a filmmaker who really got me to fall in love with film as a medium and as an art form, and that is Wes Anderson. So yeah, the film I'm going to be talking about today is The French Dispatch. The staff of a European publication decides to publish a memorial edition highlighting the 3 best stories from the last decade: an artist sentenced to life imprisonment, student riots, and a kidnapping resolved by a chef. At this point in Wes Anderson's career, if you're familiar with any of his work, you know what you're getting in for. Your beautiful cinematography, incredible soundtracks, and unique performances from his actors. All the dialogue is really deadpan delivered. He's never really strayed away from this style that he's created. And if you're a fan of Wes Anderson's work, you're aware that these things are going to happen. So when I talk about this movie, if you're a fan of Wes Anderson, you're really going to like this movie. And I was pleasantly surprised by this, because although it is Wes Anderson's typical style, it's structured very differently than a normal Wes Anderson film, and I was really appreciative of that. First thing I want to talk about is the style of this film. This is much more of like an anthology movie than a traditional narrative. So obviously, as I said in the plot description, you have this setup of the French Dispatch is a newspaper, and we're shown Bill Murray runs the newspaper, and we're introduced to all these quirky cast of characters who write for the newspaper. You know, his traditional set of actors that he has in his films, plus some great ensemble cast additions that have not been in Wes Anderson films before that I was really impressed with. What you're given is these little title card introductions that have titles and page numbers to give you kind of an idea of the duration of the segment, and it's really uniquely structured. It's also not really spelled out for you what's going on, and you kind of piece it together as you're watching the film. But if you're not someone who's accustomed to Wes Anderson's style, it might be a little jarring for you to follow along, because you're jumping from piece to piece to piece with these people. It's really just a snapshot of the life of these writers and these stories that they're crafting and creating. The next thing I want to talk about is the cinematography. Obviously, it's a Wes Anderson film. It's shot beautifully. There are some shots executed in this film that are just, as someone who's in film production who loves to watch movies get made, it's really impressive to see some of the shots that Wes pulls off in this movie. You can tell that, similarly to like Grand Budapest Hotel or Life Aquatic or any of these movies where he really spends an immense amount of time crafting these sets, that there's a lot of really intricate set pieces in this movie that accompany the story really well, and I liked that a lot. If you've seen another Wes Anderson film, you know what you're in for, but it was really beautiful to look at, and there were some shots in this film that were some of my favorite in his entire catalog. So like I said, this movie's cut up into different segments. I personally think that the strongest segment in the entire film is the segment with Benicio del Toro and Léa Seydoux. It is hilarious, it is really charming, and it's a very unique story, and I loved Benicio del Toro's performance. He is probably the standout of the entire film for me, and Léa Seydoux complements him really well. Their dynamic and their back and forth is really great. He plays a guy who went to jail for a double homicide, and while he's in prison, Adrien Brody meets him, and Adrien Brody's in jail for it's like tax fraud or something, and he realizes that Benicio del Toro's character is this incredible painter, and he takes advantage of him while he's in jail, and when he gets out of jail, continues to pressure him to make more art. And Léa Seydoux's character is a prison guard who is infatuated with Benicio del Toro and becomes his muse, essentially. And the entire story is just so ridiculous and over the top, and it's cut in with Tilda Swinton giving this presentation about him, and it is fucking hilarious. Tilda Swinton's character is fantastic. She just really gives a great delivery. And typical Wes Anderson, he has a very unique way of conveying his stories, where his characters all feel so human, even though they're delivering dialogue in such a deadpan and like blasé way. Really enjoyed all the stories. Even Owen Wilson's little segment about biking around France was pretty great. Bill Murray, even though he wasn't in the film very long, was fantastic. The other strongest performance in the entire film for me would be Jeffrey Wright. I just found his performance to be incredible. He gives some really ridiculous lines in this, but his whole thing was he was supposed to write this story about cooking. It was supposed to be just like a culinary piece. And it goes into this story about the police chief's son being kidnapped. And Bill Murray delivers this line where he's like, it was supposed to be about the food. And it's just so hilarious and well done. And yeah, Jeffrey Wright was the other standout performance for me. I would say the weakest segment in the film is the Timothée Chalamet, Frances McDormand piece. There's some really beautiful cinematography behind it, and I liked that element of it. I'm not the biggest Timothée Chalamet fan. I think he had a couple lines that were alright. Frances McDormand felt a little underutilized. That was probably the weakest segment of the film for me, but aside from that, I really enjoyed the rest of the runtime of the film. Once again, Alexander Desplat collaborated with Wes for this film. His scores are always really beautiful and quirky and fun, and they really complement the film well. And I've always liked Alexander Desplat whenever he's worked with Wes, and this film is no exception. The score really attributes to the overall mood that Wes is going for. It's really quirky and fun. It's definitely one of his most lighthearted movies, and you can tell that it's Wes's love letter to print and print media, and how it's impacted him in his own life, and eccentricities of people who write these types of articles, and the good and the bad behind it. It was really a unique piece in Anderson's filmography, and it's definitely him sticking to that style that he's used to, but sort of a departure in a way by doing like an anthology-esque film. It's always interesting to me when you watch a filmmaker like this who's very seasoned. This is like Wes's 8th or 9th feature-length film, and you know, he's been accused several times now of just doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm a person who, when it comes to Wes's filmography, I appreciate that style, and I love the way his films look. And they're really immersive worlds. It feels like reading a really good book where you're just so immersed in these characters and the situations that you never want to leave. And that's what I liked about this, but rather than it just be a straightforward narrative where we're following the same characters, you get an introduction of all of these cast of characters. And each story had a very different tone, and I liked that, and it was really interesting. And I think this is one that I'm going to like even more on revisiting, and it's one that in revisiting I think you can pick up even more on each time. I really enjoyed this, and similarly to Wes's other films, it'll probably be one I watch over and over again. So have you seen The French Dispatch yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. It's a Wes Anderson film. I really enjoyed it. It was very unique for his catalog, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. If you're not a fan of Wes Anderson, you probably won't like this movie. It's his typical quirk and goofiness taken up to level 100. So if you enjoy that, you will really get into this one. As always, if you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I've got a ton of new videos coming out. I'm finishing up my 2021 list. I've got a few more to watch before I put that out, but it should be out in the next couple weeks or so. Before then, I've got a lot of new films that I've been watching, getting caught up on, and I look forward to getting those out there for you. As always, Internet, thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.